Good morning, everybody from Sydney, Australia. This is Craig Laforest. It's just gone 11 a.m. on Wednesday, October the 5th today. And it's my great pleasure to be here again. We had our first podcast about 4 weeks ago, and we received a lot of reception from people. And thank you for your support around the world. We are trying to get the word out about these dreadful technologies which are hurting so many people around the world: V2K technology and direct energy microwave bursts, which are tormenting and torturing, and the voices from V2K abusing so many wonderful people around the world. So I'm presenting from Australia, and I'm representing V2K, the international coalition against the torture and robotization of all living beings, and also helping out with targeted justice in North America. I'm really happy today to introduce you to a wonderful man, a good friend of mine, who lives in Sydney also and is plagued with the torture of V2K. And I would like to introduce him now. Ladies and gentlemen, this is my mate, Allan Viktor.
Hello, Craig. Thank you kindly for having me. And thank you for the wider targeted individuals community for joining the show and listening to what we have in store for you. Hopefully it's going to be very insightful. And once again, thank you to Craig, V2K and Targeted Justice for the opportunity to tell my story.
Excellent. Thanks, Allan. Can we start off? We all have different stories as to how we realized that we became victims of these technologies. But could you please just start off by giving us a little bit of background on yourself?
Absolutely. I am in my late 30s. I specialize in cybersecurity. I'm a cybersecurity expert, and I'm an industry speaker and panelist in the subject of cybersecurity, especially focusing on the applications of AI and machine learning when it comes to cybersecurity technologies. I am often invited to contribute my skills and experience at summits for a lot of cybersecurity companies and sort of your big blue chip technology providers. I've been doing that for roughly 22 years now, and I think that's where I see my trajectory heading in terms of my career. I reside in Sydney, as you mentioned, but I'm originally born in Eastern Europe, having migrated here in 1995.
Okay. So when did you find out, Allan, that you were a targeted individual, and how has your experience of this changed over time?
It clicked in December last year, so 2022. 3 years prior to that, I was having some V2K symptoms, which at the time I thought was perhaps schizophrenia or psychosis, as is the case when you kind of think I'm hearing voices, external voices, because this technology is not really widely understood and widely known. It was not on a 24/7 basis up until December last year. It was just here and there a few times a day, and mostly making fun of me, making fun of the way I look or the way I speak or my day-to-day mannerisms. And it wasn't until December where it became 24/7, pretty much cybernetic torture, where the voices simply do not stop. I will be woken, funny enough, every single night between the hours of 3 and 4 a.m. Sydney local time. And the voices will immediately start. The V2K will immediately start. And it's often threat-based, just telling me that, certain things will happen to my family. If I do a particular action, or I go to work, or I don't stay in bed, simply debilitating me, that certain nefarious things will happen.
Unfortunately, it's a standard practice, and you're aware, because I've shared in our discussions, the time that the scientist Dr. Robert Duncan was down here in January this year, and he talked about his involvement with the CIA and how he co-developed this technology, and how the script that the people used with the V2K was very similar amongst all people. And it was an overwhelming discussion, and many people can, if they go to my YouTube page, they'll be able to see that discussion with Robert Duncan also. So, Allan, typically, do you experience the microwave bursts as well on your body? Do you feel those? I feel those every single day when I'm woken. I'm woken typically about 3 or 4 o'clock every single night. I average about 4 or 5 hours of sleep, and then I, like you, have it through the day, have the voices and the burnings, the waves of microwave. Do you go through that as well, the microwave?
I certainly do. These days, I feel it more in my feet rather than anything else. And sometimes it's simply my body temperature rising out of nowhere. In the beginning, so from December last year, it was very severe in that it wasn't a burning sensation, but it was a very nauseous sensation. I feel that I've adapted to that now. For some reason, my body is very adaptive to external microwaves. And I don't feel that nausea anymore. I just do feel the physical sensations, as I mentioned, with the feet burning, and sometimes the sensation of almost a needle pricking you all over your body. So it seems like the technology has advanced a great deal since I've been put into the program, in the sense that it is so accurate to the micrometer or even millimeter, where it stimulates the ends of the nerves and causes pain in that sense. It's very interesting that you mentioned Dr. Duncan. That's actually how I found out that this is not a mental health disorder, but it's actually a technology that exists. My perpetrators used the word, "I am the voice of God." And then this is where I began researching that particular term, voice of God, on the internet, and found, funny enough, the interview you had with Dr. Robert Duncan, where he explicitly talked about voice of God weapons, mentioning V2K, RNM, and some other technologies that we'll go into a little bit later. So that was my aha moment from, do I have some sort of mental health disease or disorder, to no, this is actually happening, this is real, and I'm under attack for some reason, unbeknownst to me.
It's so encouraging. It's because of people like you and others around the world, Allan, who are speaking out about this. I'd like to think that we are saving so many innocent people, because a lot of people are basically discarded from their families. The families don't do the research into what's going on. If people have done drugs in the past, or they've had a drinking problem, typically they say you're schizophrenic. And I've spoken about this on radio and in conferences, where there's a typical response from the general practitioners is that anybody who is hearing voices has a mental problem. And it only goes back, I believe, to the 60s and 70s, where people were hearing radio stations through the amalgam fillings. This is just the next level of technology, which is torturing so many people around the world. And I'm just so sorry that you are going through this as well. On the other hand, we are instrumental in bringing more awareness of this to Australia and New Zealand and Asia. So we have to keep this fight going. And the microwave, the way it works, I work with a lady in Florida, Amy, and Amy has an organization down there, Amy's Audios, and she's a forensic specialist. And I get burnt on my arm and my legs, and particularly around my feet area. I feel the microwaves come through. And she's been amazing in helping so many victims and writing reports. And she's worked with physicist Barry Trower, who was an MI5 specialist in this technology, co-developed this technology for the United Kingdom. So very fortunate that we have people like Amy who are helping us around the world. And again, I'm sorry you're going through this, but we're strong. We are strong individuals, and we will keep telling people about these technologies as long as it goes on. Why do you think that you were picked on? Why do you think that you became part of the victimization of these technology? Is there one specific thing that happened to you, or why were you placed in this terrorist program? Because in North America, targeted justice have a case going on at the present time, which is being developed with Anna Toledo, where people have been put on a terrorist list for no reason whatsoever. They might not meet the general understanding to an immigration officer that you come in and you're living in the United States, and or you could be someone different. You could be somebody who's gay. You could be somebody who's black, and the immigration person doesn't like you. We hear all these different stories. Or in addition, that there are groups of people around the world, whether they're religious groups, and they've been targeted just because it's easy to target these people. If they go to a certain place, it's very easy to target them, either implanting, chipping them, or through brain scanning. So back to my question, why do you think that you have been targeted?
I've got a couple of hypotheses. My first one, and probably the most likely one, is that I live in Australia as somebody who was born in an Eastern European country. So I may be on some sort of watch list because I guess Eastern Europe is kind of not necessarily a blacklisted country, but maybe a part of the world that should be kept an eye on. Now, if you couple that with what I do for work, which is I'm a cybersecurity expert. I run my own consultancy company where I've consulted for a lot of large businesses, financial companies, technology companies. Some of them have even previously contracted to the government. So I've been sort of assisting them in making sure that they're hack-proof in layman's terms. I perform cybersecurity education programs, cybersecurity uplift programs, where I've essentially come in and do a risk assessment on the current cybersecurity, I guess the cybersecurity threat landscape. And I provide methods that can be implemented to prevent a breach, a cyber attack. Perhaps that is a valid enough reason to watch me, to see what can be learned from what I can bring to the table in terms of cybersecurity. The other and probably least likely or less likely hypothesis is that it's simply bad luck. I've been randomly selected because there is a budget to be spent that's currently not being used, and if you don't use it, you lose it. I'm very well aware that these clandestine three-lettered agencies, they have a budget to spend on terrorism. Now, lo and behold, we haven't heard of many terrorist attacks or many terrorists being out there. So instead of losing their budget, their operational budget, they've got to find people to place into the program. So it's perhaps a case of bad luck.
It's funny you say that, because I've explained to you in several conversations how I was away on a ship up in the North Cape and we didn't have Wi-Fi on board, and it's disgusting that this technology is being used through tax-paying military satellites. So I could be up in the North Cape and hear these voices very clearly, and at any time they could just blow me off my feet. And we hear this from other victims around the world. And just back to the other point with regard to the microwave, I just wanted to highlight to those people who are listening, the victims who are listening today, I go through this regularly. We have, as I mentioned, Amy in Florida, who is a specialist in this area. So don't feel that you don't have the support of people around the world. We're here in Australia. We have other V2K victims and microwave burnt victims. We are, as I mentioned, we are just passed off by the regular doctors as being schizophrenic and so forth. However, we live really regular lives, and we bring some of the most brilliant people to this unfortunate situation. So many wonderful people are being tormented on a daily basis with this. So I don't know why I was picked. I believe I lived in Los Angeles for 28 years, as many people have heard. And I think it was just unfortunate timing that I was with the wrong people at the wrong time. And I brought something to the United States, because I was traveling so much with my position. and it might be a similar situation with you because you're such a well-educated man and a specialist in your field. What is the psychological aspect of the program, do you believe? And can you detail that for our audience?
Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that I wanted to come on the show and just share my experiences around that particular aspect. So we've had a plethora of knowledge now as part of the Targeted Justice podcast, and of course your show, and several things that Dr. Robert Duncan has talked about. Basically those are the two main technologies that we hear about, and that's V2K and RNN. So V2K being voice to skull, or the auditory effect, the Allan Frey effect, which is sending microwaves to stimulate the inner ear so that you can hear what's perceived as voices literally inside your head. And RNM being the remote neural monitoring, and that's being able to hear what you hear, see what you see, and also control the inner parts of the brain. So essentially reading thoughts. Mm-hmm. But there are two technologies that aren't really being discussed too much lately because we don't really know about them. And that's what I want to focus on today. And that is the RHIC, which is radio hypnosis, intracerebral control, and EDOM, which is electronic dissolution of memory. And just to give a high-level summary of that, radio hypnosis, intracerebral control is literally what the term suggests. It's hypnosis via a technology. So it's radio waves that induce a state of trance or hypnosis where the subconscious and the unconscious become very susceptible to suggestion. I've often felt that I wake up the next day and something feels strange. My thoughts begin to change, the way that I respond to everyday stimuli and conversations and interactions with people start changing on a very subtle scale. And I know myself. I've been in this body and in this brain for almost 40 years now. Know thyself is very, very important when you're a targeted individual so that you can take note of these subtle changes. And the other technology, the EDOM, the dissolution of memory, is literally what makes us either forget things or make it impossible to absorb new information. You and I have discussed at length. We can read a sentence 5 times over and it just doesn't seem to stick. Whereas I'm generally very, very good at observing information or ingesting it like a sponge. And it's why I'm in cybersecurity. It's why I am where I am today, because of a plethora of study and informational intake. But lately, since the 24/7 targeted individual program that I've been subjected to, it's become extremely difficult to absorb that information. So that's where that technology comes in.
Yeah, it's debilitating. The fact that we're woken up and we're onto it. We recognize what's happening. We hear the voices very clearly. We hear the perpetrators with the script, as Robert Duncan talked about. There's a typical script that they are given, and we've even shared that we have a common script between us, which happens. So, for example, you were away on the weekend and you went to a friend's place, and they actually said to me, he's gone to a friend's place on Saturday night, and I didn't know that. We hadn't spoken before, and then when we started talking today, you said that, and I said it's fascinating, and I'm seeing this correlation with so many people that these abusers are using us at the same time with the same language to confirm what Robert has gone and said. And the more that we are involved in talking about this, unfortunately, the more we're attacked. But we come from a situation or a belief in something bigger than all of us. And unfortunately, the perpetrators of these technologies and these crimes, because they are war crimes, they came out of World War II, and the perpetrators will learn a lesson one day. We just have to remain strong in our connection with a higher power or our creator.
Absolutely. And you're spot on the money there about there are certain correlations between the content that you're receiving and the content that I'm receiving, which kind of alludes to the fact that it is the same group of people or the same organization that is, I guess, targeting us and learning from each other's experiences and then crossing over. And just to go back on the two technologies that I wanted to talk about today, the RHIC, the hypnosis component is essentially, it's a way of hypnotizing a person. Now, I know when you think of the word hypnotizing, you think of a black suited man waving a watch in front of you and saying you're getting very, very sleepy. That's the movie connotation or the Hollywood connotation of that.
That's what the regular audience believes when we talk about that. But I can relate to it totally what you're saying. So sorry, go back to what you're saying.
But in actual fact, when you look at the medical field, hypnosis is actually currently very widely applied in the medical field, specifically in psychology, and that's used to treat patients of trauma, to recall maybe suppressed memories, which stems from child abuse or things like that, but also to recall dreams, which sometimes can give a hint as to why a person may be experiencing, PTSD or trauma-related diseases. And this can actually help benefit patients a lot to understand that and help them deal with their everyday struggles a lot better. Now, that's the helping people component of hypnotization. But what if that method was to be used in a nefarious way? So a weaponized way to negatively impact a subject using hypnosis. From my own personal experience, as I said, I've always felt since going on this 24/7 program that something is slowly changing in my psyche. I wake up in the morning, as I said, feeling a little bit different. I react differently, and a lot of the times negatively. And I think, hold on, I know my ethics, I know my values, and I know my beliefs. And these sudden changes in behavior or thought pattern just doesn't add up. Something's going on here, which led me into this whole quest for knowledge and researching countless hours of medical books, write-ups from scientific personnel and experts in their field. There is actually a plethora of information out there around this subject. And then you can just apply logic in saying, well, if this is used positively, it can also, by logic, be used in a negative way. And this is sort of where I've gotten to. And what I found is that hypnotists use suggestion. It's the power of suggestion. And there are various methods of suggestion. When you look at the typical approach of hypnotherapy, they deliver verbal suggestions, such as, you will not be afraid of the dark, or you will not be scared next time you see a dog, or something like that, right? This is very direct approach. But there's also something called an indirect suggestion, where it's not as straightforward, and it's usually done in a trance state. So I find myself being woken up in the middle of the night due to a noise outside. And when you're transitioning from that deep sleep into sort of a half sleep and then back into being awake, I find myself almost being in a conversation with myself as I'm transitioning from those modes. And that was also a hint at, well, something's happening in that dream state that's unconscious or subconscious that then eventually goes into being awake. And that, I believe, is the indirect suggestion. So, for example, if you go to work today, such and such will happen. Or if you eat today, this particular bad thing will happen to you. So to the point where I've woken up and avoided eating breakfast for some reason, which I always do for the past almost 40 years of my life. So something is being changed on a psyche level.
I agree with you, and it's an exhausting process to go through every day. But thank God that we are able to wake up, and I hear it subliminally as well. As I said before, I'm onto it. You're onto it. millions around the world are onto it. We estimate 6 million people around the world who have been either chipped, implanted, or have had their brain scanned, and a lot more people who are just not aware at this stage. And the subliminal voices that I get are very, very clear, very clear. And it's so clear, in fact, that I can see ahead. I can literally see the words, because the transmission, the technology also happens through the eyes. So when that happens, I could be walking down a street and somebody will say, there's that person, here's the history of that person, where you've seen that person in the past. And there's a whole load of information about that person which comes into my brain. I can go and play trivia, and I'm given the answer to trivia questions about subjects I have no idea what the subject matter is, and I just keep quiet, because I'm not going to get involved in this and not tell the truth. I won't tell a lie and just say I knew that in my memory, my God-given memory. I can delineate between my own memory and what is being passed into my. The patterns are out there. The patterns have been around for many, many years, and so to your point, I understand the subliminal messaging, and it's slowly coming out. It's slowly coming out, and one day these perpetrators will learn a lesson from all the people who are suffering at the moment. Families are being broken up. Husbands and wives are being used in such a disgusting fashion. How do you get through the day? How are you able to compose yourself and function with the lack of sleep, the voices coming into your brain all the time? How are you able to compose yourself, mate?
It's been extremely difficult. I'll be very honest. For the first 6 months of the year, which was the first 6 months of 24/7, it was extremely difficult. I would be extremely tired, not want to get out of bed, hitting that snooze button as much as I possibly could, sometimes calling in sick to work. I have lost contracts. I've lost revenue from my consulting business because I would often not show up because it was, in my mind, simply impossible to try and be able to communicate with people, look them in the eye while I was getting these terrible things spoken to in my head. Eventually, after picking up on these little, I guess, clues and hints, and doing my research online and educating myself, and then, of course, finding people like yourself and Dr. Robert Duncan and other TIs, it's made it a lot easier. Just by knowing that you're not alone, it's not just you hearing voices, it's a technology that this is happening to, and there are hundreds of thousands, if not millions of us in this planet. It was a sigh of relief. And you were one of the people that helped me a lot. I was able to tell you exactly the disgusting things, that were being said to me, and you acknowledged that, similar words or similar speech patterns were being received by you as well. And that just changes everything completely by knowing that instead of questioning yourself or doubting yourself, just by knowing, okay, this is happening, this is real, it changes everything. And also, I guess I'm a headstrong person. I've been bullied for a large part of my life, and I'm not going to be bullied this part of my life and let people win over me, even though they're trying to bring me down every step of the way. And plus, it's kind of very rewarding, and it highlights that you have a good character by not letting these people win. Even today, I'm taking a risk, I think, in talking about this rather to other TIs, because, again, the perpetrators have given me a plethora of threats not to do this, but it's more important for me to help people and to, I guess, give people an easier path in finding what's actually going on than what I've had to take. It's been very, very difficult for me to find all this information and absorb it while being, harassed and tortured constantly. And if I can save those hours and that pain for others by simply them watching a 30 or 45-minute podcast and giving them a few aha moments, then that is my job done, even if I come through to one single person. What's been extra difficult for me is the intraverbal suggestion. So I mentioned part of hypnosis, there was indirect suggestion, direct suggestion, but then there's also intraverbal suggestion. And that's, on a technical term, a modulation of the inner voice. It essentially sounds like you. You know, when you're looking at something, watching TV, or you're walking down the street and you think to yourself, oh, that's a lovely house, or that's a nice car, or that cupcake looks good, I think I'm hungry. Now, what this technology is able to do is impersonate that inner voice. It comes from the same place in your cerebral cortex as your inner voice does, but it's being impersonated. And that was extremely difficult for me in the first few months, because I thought, why am I suddenly having these thoughts? These are very terrible thoughts. This is not how I felt for the past 39 years. Why all of a sudden? And that was also, again, another clue, because I know my ethics, I know my morals, and these thoughts were completely outside of those morals and ethics. And that's, again, what helped me continue researching. I would never otherwise have gone and started researching the subject of hypnosis or any of these technologies. But, I've done so just to understand a little bit better. And if any of the other listeners or targeted individuals are sometimes being faced with these intrusive thoughts, which seem really, really terrible, it is not you. Do not blame yourself. You are not going crazy. You are not turning into a monster. You are being mind controlled. Because how do we decide what we're going to do something? Am I going to have a salad, or am I going to have a hamburger? We run it through our inner voice. Now, if somebody can impersonate your inner voice and say, you want to have the hamburger, they're controlling our decisions and therefore controlling our mind. So I asked a simple question of, is this thought fitting in terms of my morals, ethics, and values? And if the answer is no, I discard it and I move on.
Yeah. Excellent points. I mentioned Amy Holland earlier on, and Amy has an organization called Amy's Audios based in Florida, and she came down to Australia earlier this year and was talking very similarly about what you've just gone and said, with the voices coming in and making your decision about what you want, your decision about what you want to do next, or where you want to go, and so forth. So she actually was able to provide me with a report where I was scanned, and it was a very simple method to do it. And Amy was able to analyze from the frequencies that came out of my brain the voices which were coming into my brain. And I've just received this report from Amy, and it's a 26-second summary of the recording that I took and the language that was coming in, computer generated as well as real-time people who were saying all these dreadful things that we hear, as well as comments which had nothing related to any discussion or anything that I was looking at the time. This is what we go through. And she is one of the leading people in her field. She's a forensic specialist, and she was interviewed about a year ago with the physicist Barry Trower, who was ex-MI5 and co-developed this technology. And he said, if you can take this to court and prove it, it's going to be such a change for the victims of these technologies. Because at the same time as I was hearing these voices, she has gone and pinpointed exactly on this piece of paper in the 26 seconds exactly what they were saying, exactly what I was hearing. And this information was sent from me in Sydney to Amy in Florida, and she was able to pull out the different frequencies and the different voices. So overwhelming. We're getting there, mate. We're able to detail very clearly what is happening in the world and how this is eventually going to stop. I just have any other questions that you might have, or any information you want to provide for TIs before we finish today?
There's one more technology I wanted to talk about. So we've gone over the hypnosis component and the intracerebral control and the impersonation of your thoughts and your inner voice. But there's also, something else, and that's what I mentioned of, that feeling of forgetfulness, of not being able to absorb information. That's the EDOM. So when I was researching hypnosis and subjects of hypnosis, I read about some of them developing amnesia of post-hypnotic act. So after they've been hypnotized, they kind of only remember things later down the track, and like, oh, hold on, I was hypnotized and I now remember what hypnosis was about. So that's that technology, EDOM, electronic dissolution of memory. And I've been able to find so much material about this technology, which essentially causes memory loss. And I think that's important when hypnotizing a subject, which is what these people are doing to us, so that we don't catch on to what's actually happening. Now, not without getting too technical, this whole experience has also led me to research a lot about the brain and how it works, and which parts store memory and which not. The way that we recall memories, there's actually a chemical in the brain called acetylcholine or acetylcholine, depending on which part of the world that you live in. It's essentially a transmission fluid, if you think of it in a car way, for memory recollection. And if you have an excess of this chemical, it severely impacts the ability to recall memories. And what EDOM essentially does is it increases the presence of that chemical by specifically tuned radio waves that are actually coded to your brain, resonant frequency. And we talked about at length in previous podcasts about V2K and RNM. The only reason you can hear it and you experience it, as opposed to somebody sitting next to you, is because it's encoded with your brain resonant frequency. And we all have, it's like a fingerprint. When you think of a word, I think of a word, they're two completely different frequencies. And that's how this technology is pretty much based on. Now, when you look at some past mind control techniques, which were pioneered by Nazi scientists, because after the World War, the American government gave them an ultimatum saying, you can come and live freely in America if you help us do some research. And this is where your clandestine three-lettered agencies developed a lot of these technologies. And you find that one of the mind control techniques is memory loss, so that you don't remember what's being done to you. And therefore, you almost wake up a new person every single day in a gradual sense until you become a personality that, the perpetrators want you to be. So it's a gradual way of changing behavior patterns and changing your personality, in other words. And when we look at mind control techniques, and again, something I've studied at length in, old World War and sort of Nazi scripts, they use certain techniques, and these three techniques often pop up in a lot of information that I've been reading. There's repetition, and that's something you and I both experience. You get the listen to me very carefully, and I get the same thing. And there's constant repetition of constant words every single day. It almost seems like Groundhog Day, right? But there's a science to that. If you keep repeating somebody to somebody every single day, they're going to start auto-completing that thought. So imagine hearing the same song 500 times a day for 6 months. What's going to happen the next time you hear the same song and you hear the first beat or the first sentence of the song? Your brain knows exactly where that's going to lead. So that's the repetition component of mind control. And it kind of makes the subject self-harass themselves by saying, listen to me very carefully. Your brain now starts auto-completing all the things that have been said to you for how many months or years without much effort from the perpetrator.
I think we've covered so much today, mate, and I just want to thank you so much for being here today. It's such a pleasure to have you speak about this, and we will constantly educate people. But are there any final words you would like to say?
Absolutely. For all our fellow TIs out there who are struggling, please keep in mind, it is not you. This is being done to you. It could be for a number of reasons, but don't go there. Don't look at the why. Just understand the how, and do not give up. Keep getting up in the morning. Go and do your gym class or go for a run. Have your breakfast and go on with your daily lives. I know that a lot of times it's very difficult to socialize because you feel like people will think you're weird because you're speaking and you're being interrupted constantly. But just live your life as per normal, because it's not going to go away, but you can make it more bearable by just having your normal routines and getting on with your life as per normal.
Thanks, Allan. Finally, everybody, I just want to say we are unfortunately in a world of evil at the present time. If you are a targeted individual, a victim, understand that you have so much support and love throughout the world, not only at Ecotour and our website. If you want to have a look at more information about what everybody is going through, educate your family members, educate your friends. And I have, as Allan has done also, in some cases, I've just had to say goodbye to some friends who don't do the research, or family members who don't do the research. We are intelligent people. We are giving back. We are trying to help other people. We are not delusional. We are not crazy people. We lead wonderful lives, but our journey has been interrupted. So please go to the website www.ecotour.be, and also targetedjustice.com. Remember, you have so much support and we are here for you. Thank you so much for listening to us today, and we look forward to presenting another show in a few weeks' time. Thank you and goodbye.